Alright everybody, hey, it's Trav again. Yeah, this is part 2. I took a little bit of a break and fast-tracked a few things for day 6, and we are continuing on, we being the continually referred to third person I, me. The guy who's going to try and do this in the authentic method, to how the original screen glove was first seen, built, constructed in the original film that we all love and are still talking about 30 plus years later. Obviously at this stage we're looking at kind of a kit-bashed version of the glove we all love to hate. And it's a far cry even from the Becker clone, which is pretty damn accurate, but not as accurate as this is actually going to be in terms of the general template work. And let me touch on that really quickly before I start talking about what's going on here. And really, I mean, what's going on here is everything is laying on my master D.E.S.A 2.0 Ultimate Edition backplate. And that backplate, you know, it's even more akin to a hybrid than anything else for me, because we know the backplate changed between this condition, the bends and the torque, from, you know, how it looks today, part 2, part 1. This is very close to part 1, and part 1 has some differences across the board from part 2 and how it looked, and we've talked about that ad infinitum. You know, the fantail swoop over here on this side, and how that's going to work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is actually much closer to how it looks today in terms of the general ease of the bend procedure. It's ever so slightly arced, and, you know, again, I could even flatten this out a little further, and it would be a little bit more accurate, but because I am anticipating and have anticipated working with the thinner brass, which is 0.02, and I'm going to thank a very, very generous fellow artisan for the assist on that little bit of information, which is actually on order. This stuff is 0.024 or 0.020, something like that. So it's been a long time since I've even gauged this stuff. This stuff is so much thicker that it's good for me to have this bent out just a little bit more towards, you know, the arc that it sometimes shows when it's on the hand. And this is just backplate cock blockery. I mean, it's just, this is, you know, we could talk about backplates for days and days and days. Excuse me. And how it works. And versus how it doesn't work, and, you know, everybody has their own take on certain aspects of it. Did they get the rounding of the left corner properly? Is it too sharp on the right? Is the fulcrum too low? You know, all that stuff. You know, what about the three main, you know, mini arcs on the right side? Are they tweaked properly? Is the main dip on the fulcrum angle between the ring and the middle in the proper position? Does it show in the swipe when it's the part 1? All this stuff is conjecture. We all have our particular takes on the business, we all being the glove makers. And the finished piece is telltale of that. And I've talked about it for years, and especially in the last 2 years, and how it looks different in the part 2 and the part 1, blah, blah, blah. So we're not going to get into that right now. This is basically, for all intents and purposes, my master build piece. It has all the basic forms and all the basic shapes and all the basic silhouettes that it will look at any degree pretty damn authentic. When I start converting this into the child glove of the part 1, there's different stuff going on, subtle. And because of the screen gauge that I'm going to be using, it's going to act and perform differently. And what I'm hoping for is a performance that is going to mirror how it actually looked in the actual poses. Not just the visage, the static visage, but the actual posing and working and the springing of the glove and the splaying and everything else that I've always shot for, that you can't get with the thicker stuff because the thicker stuff doesn't move like the screen gauge, which is virtually paper thin, according to my knowledge. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. But for all intents and purposes right now, it's pretty damn accurate. It's pretty spot on to how the glove looks today. And the weathering is not supposed to be that way. I just torched the shit out of it because I wanted it uniform, and it had that pink spot on it before. So this was the same backplate you've seen in other parts of my videos that I just went ahead and gave it a how it looks today kind of finish really quick. Yeah, so coming along pretty nicely, and obviously I'm having a bit of a nightmare fest. So I've got 3 running in the background way downstairs for some background ambiance. First time I've thrown a nightmare movie on in a long time to actually work to. I generally work to, you guys know, whatever I'm in the mood for. It's very rare that I do a nightmare. And so I've talked on and on here on day 6 about this backplate being my kind of hybrid, as it looks today, almost part 1, sort of part 2-y guy. It's got all the main bends that I have to keep myself in check about. And with minor modifications either way, this will turn into whatever backplate I so desire. Well, I don't like to muck with it too much, so what I always do when I start a new glove is it goes through, and this is something you don't know about me, it generally goes through, whether I show it or not, 3 generations of specific backplates per glove. It starts off with my primary master build backplate. Then it goes to its own, then cut down intermediate version backplate, which will be as close to the finished piece as possible, so I can have kind of a psychological, you know, reference or vantage point as to how I want to start thinking about this and how it's going to look in the end. And the closer I can get to an acute visual representation, one that's laser focused and looking like the almost finished beast, obviously the happier I get with my OCD. So as we continue on, I'm going to bang out a backplate, and you know, we'll talk a little bit about it. It'll be the intermediate stage of what is going to be the middle ground of the part 1 prototype, and you know, when we get to the final stage, we will build yet another, which will be then the final. So the intermediate backplate is probably going to look pretty close. We'll see how we do. I haven't built a part 1 in a while, and I've been wanting to apply certain features to the Ultimate Edition that I haven't ever done before. So we'll see how crazy I want to get. It's probably going to be just a very standard part 1 shape, and it's also not the proper gauge, as I said. The backplate brass at I think 0.024, which is what I've been using for the past couple of years, which is pretty accurate to most of the sequel gloves. Ooh, there goes my finger in the lens, sorry guys. Is not the proper gauge for the part 1. The part 1 was paper thin according to my information. Thank you very much to the chap who gave it to me. 0.02 brass, paper thin. So it's going to bend and do all sorts of functional things. I'm going to devote a whole bunch of video footage to the final part 1 backplate on the hand, working in conjunction with the stalls and the fulcrum and all that stuff when we get to that point. But for now, let's build one that looks like the part 1, won't quite bend like the final one will, but for all intents and purposes will look and fit the bill. Alright, so everybody's basically seen the free-for-all that was my D.E.S.A backplate. I gave that away months ago, hasn't changed, and if you haven't, just scroll down on my wall and you should find it. It's a few months back, and take some screen grabs. Anyway, it's got measurements too. So I've taken my only piece of remaining brass in my possession until my actual screen gauge brass comes. And again, this is the thicker stuff, to cut out the intermediate part 1 backplate. So let's get to this and see how we do. Alright, so what I've gone ahead and done is I have given this a basic part 2 weathering. I just wanted to give it, you know, a standard screen ready weathered brass appearance. But the nice thing is it was aged with the authentic method, so even though it's only the part 2 finish really, it's pretty nice in terms of tone, in terms of sheen, and in terms of reflection and refraction. So we're looking pretty good under any light source that we want to work with, and It holds up really nicely to the tone of the aged pieces, and for me this will be a nice workable part 1 backplate, even though we're not doing any of the scorching. So this is going to be the intermediate. We're going to go ahead and bend this out, and I'll see you guys in just a second. Alright, here we go. The master backplate for the Part 1 KRUEGEAR Ultimate Edition D.E.S.A 2.0 is complete. This, again, this is my humble opinion on how this functions, how it looks, how it moves in the proper gauge, which again this isn't. But for intents and purposes of this demonstration and the needs that I have for it, it suffices to discuss it as if it were the proper gauge, because essentially this is the complete bend procedure that will be applied to this Part 1. I want the Part 1 to look as it did in a couple of shots in the film, and again, we've discussed this. When this thing goes into actual production for the child gloves, and I'm using the really thin 0.02 gauge brass, which will actually bend and contort with the movements of the finger armature, as it did on the film, it's going to change its appearance. I should be able then to match any scene that I want just by moving the hand. But we all have those scenes we love. You know what I love. I love the opening palm turn and the bathtub scene. So those are the most indicative of a full splay, after the glove has been worked a little bit by Lou Carlucci. Now, if you guys have seen, there's a picture of Lou's hairy arm sticking in the glove just as it was finished. Literally, it hadn't been mucked with at all. Even the knuckle flats were completely smooth. There was no torquing. You know, that thing went through a lot of torquing and a lot of movement to get it to be functional. It was very stiff when it first came off the assembly line. So I take that into account. I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look like the opening shot. And the opening shot, thank goodness, is a full splay. So you're getting a very good representation in this particular bend procedure of how it's going to look when it is applied to the Ultimate Edition screen gauge of the brass. I've popped it next to my hybrid, you know, all-in-one backplate that has a lot of the telltale bends. The buckling for the Part 2 over here is more pronounced, you know, and I got a lot of that kind of detail from a lot of the periodicals. It's got that almost, you know, fully arced teepee, the tent effect. You know, it's got the proper dip and the fulcrum point. That until Part 2 rolled around, we talked about the fantail swoop. You can really see the difference between the two. And this is definitely more towards how it looks today. So we'll just kind of take that as a two-prong differential. But, you know, this is the first time I've applied a lot of really fine detail to the Part 1 fantail swoop. And it really holds up. It really holds up. The measurements, you know, my templates at this point across the board, and there are those in the community who, templates are our biggest argument to date, our being glove makers. Whose is accurate, whose is not. We all have sources we get them from. We all know who we are. We all know how we do that. And we all know, you know, there are fans of one front or fans of the other. And it's not about that. It's about, you know, the build on the whole. It's about the community on the whole. And a lot of the comments that I've gotten or caught wind of over the years is, you know, how can you know, yes, it looks good and da 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 da, and how can your templates be as accurate as so and so? It's not about that. This is my glove. I'm not selling these. This is my baby. This is my baby that I've been working on for 25 years. It happens that a couple of clients are getting these, and I'm happy about that. To those clients I say, as far as this glove builder is concerned, I'm very happy with them. The hours that I study, the days and the months and the years that I sit there with this stupid magic tool and all that stuff, I'm done with the templates. Templates are done. How many times did I revise them? Tons. So the proof is in the pudding. How good are my templates? My templates, well, blah, blah, I hate saying that word. My templates are as good as the ability to pose out this glove in any shot that you want to bring up as a fan or as a prospective aficionado or as a client who's going to own one of these things. Any picture you put it up against, any movie you put it up against, any scene you put it up against in the first two films, I guarantee this glove will match up on close inspection within a millimeter. So that said, that's just me and my baby. That's not putting it out there to, I'm trying to answer some of the comments that I get personally in my inbox, and it's not about that. It's about creating the glove that I saw on that screen that I wanted to have in my hand, and now a few guys are getting them. So the backplate is a pretty exciting triumph for me. Aaron and I played around with this last night, and I'm as excited to have this in my hand as you guys who are getting them, as any fan would be to have, something that looks, feels, works, and has the life and personality of this backplate. And the backplate doesn't get enough credit because it's a fucking bitch. It is a bitch to get this thing right. So this is the first time I've ever seen it on my table in my hand where I'm not going, oh God, that's not it, and I'm trying to, hide something, or I'm trying to convince myself, well, okay, it doesn't matter that that one single angle doesn't quite match up. That's the gag. It does matter. And it took me that long, 25 years, to get it to where, because of my work, because of my study, because of people who have helped me, I have had fans, I've had fellow glove builders send me reference, I mean everything under the sun to get this to where it is, and it makes the entire glove. Let's not even talk about mobility, but to have it in my hand, part one, that I can see in my mind's eye, and it matches, and I can hold it up and it matches, and I'm not sitting there going, oh, this angle, oh God, the angle, it doesn't work, but it's okay, it works from this angle. This works on every single angle. So, I'm really excited, and I'm geeking out about it. And, I'm going to do a little sweep around and maybe cut some footage together, but here you go, guys. Not worrying about the scorch pattern at all. All I'm worrying about is that this is going to stay in this condition, in mint, and build all of my future gloves for the Part 1 series, for the D.E.S.A Ultimate Edition. And when this goes into the full screen-accurate gauge of the metal, it's going to bend, it's going to torque, and it's going to do exactly what it's supposed to do out of this shape. And wear it as you will. Here we go.